Now let's dive into it. I've added in some images here. These are different types of cervical mucus. Now, as we go through this, I want you to understand that your cervical mucus may be completely different to your best friends, who may be completely different to mine. There's no two people that have the exact same patterns and styles of cervical mucus. And on the online world, it can get really overwhelming if you're not recognizing that you've got that egg white cervical mucus and everyone is saying that's the peak. Yes, it can be a peak, but your peak may not look like that. And that does not mean that you are not ovulating and that you are not having fertile cervical mucus. I've had plenty of clients who have just shown that they are slippery or wet, and that is their peak. They are ovulating and it is fertile cervical mucus. So before we get too into it, I just really want you to remember that it's really important. So, your cervical mucus is a reliable source of fertility. It happens in real time and it changes throughout the length of your cycle. So, right at the beginning of your cycle, you have your bleed. So, your bleed is going to be considered the cervical mucus type that you get then, because we can't actually tell. Even though your blood is made up of different fluids and stem cells and cervical mucus as well, we can't actually identify what it is. So, we just mark it as the bleed. Shortly after that, you might notice some times of dryness or a little bit of tackiness, spotting, those kind of things. So spotting still classified as your bleed. But right after your period, you are usually in an infertile time if it's dry. If it's creamy though, it could be a sign that your fertility is kicking straight in, which is happening for some people. So as fertility starts to increase, as the estrogen is starting to increase, your cervical mucus is starting to produce and get more fertile. So usually at the beginning, it's not as fertile. As you could see in that previous image, the sperm, if the cervix isn't fully opened, sperm can still enter, but it isn't that environment. It's more hostile. They can't survive in there and swim up through. But while you are learning, it's important to be charting down absolutely everything you notice about your cervical mucus, so that we can then make these decisions and identify these patterns based on what is physically charted. We can't assume when it comes to this. So you may get a little bit of stickiness or tackiness, which is infertile, but as it starts to get more creamy, this is a sign that you are entering your fertile window. And I treat creamy cervical mucus, depending on the texture of it, as fertile. Okay, it can be a clear fertile sign for many women. You may also notice egg white, slipperiness, wetness. These are considered the peak. These are very fertile days. Okay, same with watery. So, if you want to know, we're going to go through all of these stages in a minute. So, don't worry, that's not the educational part of it. But you might be wondering, so how do I actually check this? So the first way to kind of really start developing the habit is just to notice when you're wiping at the bathroom. If there's nothing, it's dry. We're not going internally. We're not feeling the dampness of our vaginal area. We are more seeing if our body is producing this liquid. If it's not producing this liquid, if nothing is showing up in our undies, it's clearly dry. If something is showing up in your undies, write it down. If it's dry, if it lasts 1 hour, if it sticks around all day, that is really important. So we want to just be able to go with the sensation rather than checking internally. It's not about checking internally here. It's through wiping, noticing what's in our undies, and the sensation. What can we feel? If we're overthinking and if we can't feel anything, then we're dry. Then you are going to observe and track the color, the texture, and if there is a stretch, you can note down that it's stretchy or slippery. But once again, saying that it's wet is pretty clear indicator that it's fertile, and that's all we kind of need to worry about. We don't need to say super stretchy or not stretchy. Like, it is great information, definitely chart it if you want to, but I don't want you to be fixating on that right now. We just want to tune into what it is and what your actual signs are. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at each of the types of cervical mucus and how you can chart these and what they mean. So first of all, we can have dry, which I've just mentioned, and it's clearly evident that there's no cervical mucus here. Okay, so you would code this as D on your tracker. So it's written code. Now, next up, you may have sticky or tacky. This is also infertile. It can be a sign straight after you have had your period or also after ovulation, but it is not an environment for sperm. It cannot survive. Now we come to creamy or lotion like. And a lot of people may say that this is infertile, but it is definitely fertile. Okay, depending on the texture, sperm can travel with this creamy lotion like. Okay, so if you are trying to conceive and you have this, this is definitely an opportunity. You don't need to wait until your peak. If you are trying to avoid pregnancy for now, this is the time where you need to ensure that you have your backup method of contraception. So it is possibly fertile, and you would track this, code this as C. C for creamy, and you can write thin or thick or blobby because that can give us some great information. If it's creamy and dry, then it's showing that it's a dry day. Okay, if it's just in your undies and it's really dry, but if it's got more of that texture through it, if it could be a passageway for sperm, that's the difference. That's how we can tell compared to just tackiness in our undies. So we do have to think like that flowing river. Is it going to move or is it like stuck and stagnant? So we can come around to watery now. Watery, stretchy, and it crosses over with the egg white as well. Egg white is more stretchy. Watery is more when you feel like wet. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel wet today. And in your undies, it's like, you can just feel the wet patch in your undies. It's like when you're wearing yoga pants and you're like, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, what's going on? You can feel it when you're walking down the street. And this is clearly a sign that you are in your fertile window. And the code for this would be W. Now, if you do notice, if you are at the toilet and you wipe and you see this big stretchy sign of cervical mucus, that is clearly egg white. So you can note that down, that it's stretchy, that it's egg white, that it's clear, or it's transparent. The keywords are completely up to you. What we need to focus on is being consistent with what we're coding. So when we are consistent, it makes it easier to find patterns. So watery or wet would be W, egg white would be EW. Now remember, just because if you don't see egg white doesn't mean that you're not getting a peak in your cycle. You could be getting a peak here. Totally normal. Then what happens is after you might see what your peak is, it's going to drop back down again because after you've ovulated, estrogen is no longer there, progesterone takes over, so we're going to see more of a drop in dry again. It may be a little bit tacky, but once again, to confirm ovulation, we need to see a complete shift in cervical mucus. If it's still feeling wet, you could still be in your fertile window. It's really important to know that. We have to see 3 consistently dry days for us to confirm ovulation. So if we would be marking this, we would be going back to dry. If you're noticing it's wet, keep writing down wet. You may not have ovulated yet. Really, really important. And this is why I absolutely love teaching this method, and it is fertility in real time because you can accurately identify. If it's becoming a little bit confusing then, that's when we compare BBT, which is your basal body temperature, in with it to see exactly what's going on. And we'll talk a little bit more about when it can be difficult to identify cervical mucus, like when it can get a little bit confusing. So we'll get to that in a minute. But before we do, this is kind of like the wave, yeah? Your wave may look different, but this is a standard, I don't like that word, this is the textbook cycle. Your cycle, my cycle is not textbook cycle. Your cycle may not be textbook cycle as well. So it's more of the dry to the sticky, tacky, to creamy. And as it's rising, it's getting wetter. And then we come back down after the wave and we go back to dry or really sticky cervical mucus.